Welcome back to B&B Movie Reviews. This week, we take a swim with Diane and NYAD, look back on the life and career of Sylvester Stallone, and try to save the timeline with our spoiler review of Loki. Stay right there. B&B Movie Reviews is up next.
Don't you get it? The mind. This is what I was missing when I was younger. I've got it now.
The mind does not swim 100 miles across the ocean, right? The body does.
Yes, that's the other piece of it.
Oh, there's another piece to it.
Yes, I need to get myself functioning at the highest level. You're going to be my coach.
That's why you wanted to play ping pong. You never want to play ping pong.
No, so, Bonnie.
Absolutely not. No.
You said I needed to do something to get out of my funk.
I meant you should sign up for speed dating or get a therapist. Not come out of a 30-year retirement for some dangerous, absurd fantasy.
I am doing it. I'm not done. I've more in me, and so do you.
Diane and NYAD has a crazy idea to swim from Cuba to Florida and ask her best friend Bonnie to be her coach in the inspirational sports drama NYAD, currently streaming on Netflix. So Brad, Diane and NYAD, I'm not really familiar with like long distance swimmers.
No,
so
it's not something you obsess over?
As a sports fan, you know, basketball, football, baseball, but you know, long distance swimming, it's not really.
Looks pretty rough.
It does look looks extremely rough.
Pretty rough.
And then when you watch this movie, you see how rough it can actually be. But I gotta say, man, I really enjoyed watching this movie.
Yeah, I did too.
Yeah.
I had a great time with the movie.
Okay.
You know, like if you watch the trailer, you know basically the path that this movie is going to take.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very traditional in terms of like a sports film. I mean, it could be Hoosiers for all I know. But how often do you get to see Annette Bening and Jodie Foster act against each other?
Yeah.
Not often. It's a really rare treat.
Yeah.
And they slay in this film. They're so good together.
They are really good, especially playing these real life people and these two real life women who were really best friends, and that comes through their performances. And it's really nice to see because, like you say, we don't get powerhouses like Jodie Foster and Annette Bening, and seeing them like portrayed in this way.
I can't even remember the last time I saw Jodie Foster in a movie. It's been too long. And getting to see her, you know, act off against Annette Bening, I mean, it was like a title bout. You know, like this is a fight that I need, you know, front row tickets to, and here we are, we got them. There are a couple themes that NYAD is trying to explore. One of them is that when you watch an incredible human being do this ridiculous achievement, this athletic feat, what they're exploring in NYAD is that it's not a solo achievement. Right, like a whole bunch of people have to come together to create something like this, to achieve something like this. And so like there's that theme going on. And then there's the theme of like, no one should tell you that you're too old to do anything. Because it is absurd for Diane and NYAD in her 60s to swim from Cuba to Key West. And I know that there's debate about whether or not that actually happened. You can go online. There's a lot of people out there debating this right now.
Really? Okay.
But thematically within the context of the film, it's about saying like, you know, I'm never too old to achieve my dreams. And as somebody, you know, who's feeling every birthday more and more these days, I needed to hear that message.
No, you're right. And I do like that message as well, because it really speaks to that from the beginning of the film. And that theme is kind of resonated throughout the entire movie, because that's basically what she's fighting for. You know, everybody keeps telling her, like, you know, give up. This is not something that can be done. And she believes, even Bonnie, her best friend and her coach, is telling her that, you know, is this something that you really want to do? Is this something you need to do? But, you know, if she feels like that this is her calling, this is her purpose, and, you know, she failed to do it when she was younger, when she was competing at a younger age, but now that she's retired and she's in her 60s, I think the movie is really speaking to something that I think me and you and a lot of people can relate relate to as far as like, yeah, it's never too late to kind of give up on those dreams.
And, you know, the way that this film, executes the swimming sequences. There's a lot of swimming in it. And, you know, they're really trying to sell you on the impossibility of such an act to swim. Again, from Cuba to Key West. This is a long distance. Right? The way that they shoot all those sequences, I think, were really well done. I especially liked the moments where she starts to hallucinate as she's swimming, and being wrapped up in man-o-wars and whatnot. I think the movie's actually quite beautiful underwater, and you know, some of it's achieved digitally, some of it's achieved practically, and the blending of those two things was seamless.
I couldn't tell the difference. I mean, to be honest, I couldn't really tell the difference.
When the Taj Mahal suddenly appears on the bottom of the ocean floor.
Oh, well, that,
it looked like a CG effect.
When
cool.
she does it actually does look good. Yeah. But I do like those hallucinations. I can't even say the word.
Hallucinations, Bryan.
Hallucinations. Thank you. Because it kind of harkens back to something traumatic that happened in her childhood, and going to that point as far as like never being too old. This is also something that you almost understand the drive that she has, because it feels like there's something more.
Well, she's struggling to understand, what is that drive? Where does that come from? What is the relation to that drive? What is the relation to her own name? And I liked all of that stuff. And again, I don't know if I would have been as enthralled with this movie if not for the performances of Annette Bening and Jodie Foster. And like Jodie Foster's character, you know, she's the coach, you know, she's the friend. Like,
I know.
That could be a nothing role.
She makes a lot out of it.
Jodie Foster on fire. I need more Jodie Foster in my life.
Yeah, well, True Detective the next season.
Cannot wait.
Cannot wait. Yeah, so what's your rating?
B+.
Yeah, it's a B+ for me too. I really enjoyed this movie. Whether it's true or not, still debatable.
And for first-time watchers, B+, we give it a B+ if we like it, a B- if we don't.
Yes.
B+, we liked it.
Yes, and it's a B+ for both of us. There you go. So those are our thoughts on NYAD. When we return, Sylvester Stallone, we take a look at his life and career in the Netflix documentary. Stay right there.
Yeah, it's so sad. It's not.
After rent and power, I can get groceries. It's sad to say food comes last. Anna from Texas. No one should have to worry where their next meal will come from. Together, we can end hunger. Learn more at feedingamerica.org.
He wasn't cast in things because he was deemed uncastable.
The rejection was my encouragement. At that point, I knew my fate was determined on the pen.
The genius behind that. This was not an accident.
This is the theater where Rocky premiered. My brother goes, this could be the best day or the worst day of your life. Something happened, something magical.
You could hear the cheers from the inside, outside on the street from the theater. It's the last picture of him being unknown.
Sly, the Netflix documentary, chronicles the rise of Sylvester Stallone as he forges his own path to stardom and the realization of what it all means as he reflects on his illustrious career. Bryan, earlier this year we had the Arnold Schwarzenegger Netflix documentary, docu-series. Pretty long series.
Yeah.
This one, much brief.
Yeah, this is not a series. This is a movie. I think it's like an hour, 30 minutes or so. You know, Schwarzenegger gets 3 episodes, an hour each. It seems like they're competing again. What's going on?
I think the only reason this documentary exists is because Arnold Schwarzenegger had a documentary on Netflix. That's what I think.
I thought they were past this in the 80s. They're still competing now?
Yes, they are. They absolutely are. And I enjoyed going back through Stallone's career.
Yeah.
I don't know if I loved the framing device of Stallone talking about, like, I need to move. Like, every once in a while, you got to, like, change your scenery.
Yeah.
And you know, as all these people come together to move these giant statues out of his mansion in Los Angeles to move to the East Coast, where? No idea. They don't come back to that idea. I don't know if I really bought that whole, like, you know, ball it up and throw it away and start over kind of thing. But I did enjoy revisiting my Stallone memories along with Stallone, because that's really all this is.
Yeah, man. I mean, we talked about it with Arnold. This is the era that we grew up in, and of course, you know, Stallone and Arnold. And the thing that I really liked about this documentary, again, it was kind of going down memory lane for us as fans to go through his career, but also kind of look at some of the behind the scenes. And I guess maybe that's probably my biggest issue, because it doesn't really break any new ground. There are stuff about his childhood and his upbringing, especially
his relationship with his father.
Yeah, his relationship with his father is some stuff that we didn't know, and you also can kind of see how that kind of formed his drive.
The best scene in the entire documentary is when Stallone is giving context to a polo game that he had back in the late 80s, early 90s with his father, and you get to see this little Entertainment Tonight clip of Stallone talking about his dad delivering a cheap shot to him.
Yeah.
And you realize like that little joke that he has on Entertainment Tonight is actually filled with venom and a lot of anger towards his dad.
Yeah.
And that was the last time he ever played polo, you know, because he was full of rage.
Mm-hmm.
That was like the best stuff that the documentary offered. I wish it did more than just play the hits. Like, even if you're just going to reflect on Stallone's movies, of course, we got to talk a lot about Rocky. Of course, we got to talk a lot about Rambo. Though, could have used a few more moments with Tango and Cash and Cobra.
I know, right? Yeah.
Movies that I adore, but maybe don't get as much of a spotlight on them as Rocky and Rambo do.
It's interesting because, you know, I would have loved spotlights on some of those smaller or not as, you know, well-known movies compared to Rocky and Rambo, but they do talk about some of his pitfalls with some of the decisions that he made with, like, Throw Mama from the Train or Oscar, like, especially when he started.
From a Train, Stop or My Mom Will Shoot.
Stop or My Mom Will Shoot.
Right, Bryan.
My bad. I'm sorry. It was one of those train movies, but yeah, Stop or My Mom Will Shoot. That's not a train. Oh,
there's no train in it. Have you watched the Estelle Getty masterpiece, Stop or My Mom Will Shoot?
Scene on the train. Maybe it was.
I don't think so.
I may be wrong. But they talk about some of the pitfalls with some of the decisions that he made, especially when he tried to move over into comedy.
Yeah, he saw Arnold Schwarzenegger doing Twins and getting a lot of success with that. Well, I can do farce. Let me hang out with John Landis. I actually think Oscar's pretty good. Hot take, Oscar's pretty good. Go revisit it.
Yeah.
But I think where the movie really suffers, and it understandably suffers in this way. There are some moments in Stallone's life that are not so happy, right? He lost his son Sage, and since this film is so much about fathers and sons, you wish that Stallone could talk about that a little bit, but it's not our right to have front row seats to his pain.
Yeah, and if it's something that he's not comfortable speaking with, then you got to respect that the fact that he doesn't want to open. It just feels like when you're doing a documentary like this, because again, if we're going to compare this to the Arnold documentary, and we talked about this before, whether we like some of the answers that we got, Arnold did kind of open up about some of the mistakes he made.
He addressed them. He acknowledged them.
Yeah,
whereas the Sly documentary doesn't really talk about any of his wives.
It doesn't acknowledge,
it doesn't really talk about any of his family outside of like his love of his daughters. But that's what this is.
Yeah.
So it's a tour through his greatest hits, and as is somewhat enjoyable.
So, yes, it is. It is very somewhat enjoyable. I mean, again, I'm going back to the comparison, but the one thing I liked about Sly is the fact that, not saying that Arnold was not like this, but we talked about a little bit how he forges his own path and how he kind of made his own route to stardom. And he started because he started writing. He started doing script writing, screenwriting, and Sly feels like he's more involved and invested in that creative side.
He sees himself as a writer, and he had a tremendous success as a writer with Rocky. And I think some of the sadness that's found in Sly is the fact that he wasn't able to really replicate that. And every time he ventured away from Rambo and away from Rocky, he didn't have the success that he would have liked. So he kept returning to the well of success. And at a certain point, after Copland, I feel like Stallone learned the wrong lessons from the financial disappointment of Copland. And he's like, well, I guess what the people want are Rockies and Rambos, and I'm just going to do Rockies and Rambos for the rest of my life.
That's unfortunate because he gave a really great performance.
Awesome.
Yeah, I mean, he gave a really good performance in Copland. And I think that could have been a turning point in his career.
If Copland had been successful, imagine the Stallone performances we would have gotten.
Yeah.
But, you know, he's doing Tulsa King right now. That movie, that show is strange, but kind of wonderful also.
Yeah. But I like where Stallone's career is now. What's your rating for this one?
I struggle with this one a little bit because I am disappointed that it's not as personal as it could have been. But again, I also recognize that I don't deserve any access to that personal side of him. I ultimately think if you are a Stallone fan, you gotta watch it.
Yeah.
And if you're a Stallone fan, you're gonna give it a B+. And I'm a Stallone fan, so I'm gonna give it a B+.
Yeah, I mean,
but I'm on the fence.
I'm the same way. Again, this is where I wish we had that sliding scale because it would be a straight B for me.
No.
But we have to pick. So I think I'm going to go the same. It's a B+. I mean, if I gave Arnold a B+, and I feel like between the two, I might lean a little bit more to a slide.
I do too, because it's not so long. Arnold's documentary was too long.
I know. And so, like I said, I mean, it's a great trip down memory lane for fans of I keep saying Arnold. I'm so sorry.
They're the same.
I know, right?
They're not the same person.
No, they're not. For Sly. But so, yeah, I give it a B+ as well. So, yeah, those are our thoughts on Sly, currently streaming on Netflix. So, when we return, we are going to talk about Loki Season 2. Full spoilers, so stay right there.
If you're buzzed and doing this to make yourself feel okay to drive, you're not okay to drive.
It's not enough to protect the sacred timeline, Loki. Even down there, it's full of death and destruction and injustice. Do you really want to be the god who takes away everyone's free will so you can protect that?
But what good is free will if everyone's dead?
And who are you to say we can't die trying? Who are you to decide we can't die fighting? You're replacing one nightmare with another. I grew up in apocalypses, Loki. I've lived through enough of them to know that sometimes it's okay to destroy something.
If there's a hope that you can replace that thing with something better.
Loki is caught in a philosophical crossroads when he has to make the choice between destiny and free will in the season finale of Loki Season 2, currently streaming on Disney+. Ryan, we loved the first season of Loki.
Yeah.
We loved it.
Yeah.
Hard to follow up that love with a second season. Did the second season rise to the creativity of the first one?
For me, I would say yes. I really thoroughly enjoyed this second season. Yeah, I mean, it's hard for me to kind of separate the two because they do feel like one thing is, as far as like, season 1 and season 2. I kind of look at it as a whole, as one piece. But I have to say that coming into season 2, from the opening shot of season 1, from the opening episode all the way through, I really enjoyed this season. I think one of the reasons I enjoyed it is from where we left off at the season finale of season 1 with He Who Remains and the choice that Sylvie made to kill him. And then when Loki goes back to the TVA, there's an immediacy to season 2. Like it just starts and you're in it and you're going. And I like that about it. I like that pacing of it. I like the immediacy of it. I like how the stakes feel real for Loki. But then as we go through the season, I like how, sometimes it feels like Loki is taking a back seat to his own show. But as we're going to talk a little bit more about the season finale, this was always his show. This was always his arc, and that's definitely something I want to talk about a little further, is his journey and his arc. But I absolutely love this show.
I almost disagree with every single thing you said.
Oh, man.
I don't like the pacing of the second season. I don't feel like it's one whole series. Really? I feel like season 1 feels one way and season 2 feels a totally different way.
Okay.
I much prefer the first season The second season has moments that I really love, and I do like ultimately where it takes the character of Loki, and his arc is very satisfying.
Yeah.
I don't know if I like the arcs of the other characters in the second season. And I also feel like I could have watched the first episode of the second season and the last episode of the second season and had the exact same emotional response. I feel like there is so much spinning. In the middle of Loki season 2 that was unnecessary.
When we look at the other characters, whether it's Mobius or B-15, I think a lot of that is relevant, like who they were in their previous life before they got to the TVA. I think is really relevant to some of the choices and some of the choices that they make and how they are, because we learned that He Who Remains has been wiping the minds of everyone in the TVA. But, and again, this maybe goes to your point, because we get this in the final episode where maybe all we needed were those bookend episodes. But it's like Mobius, when he tells the story about how he couldn't prune the little kid, you know, that was going to cause the death of like 5,000 people, but he couldn't do it, and there was a Renslayer that had to do it. You know, even though his mind was wiped, I feel like getting to see his backstory of who he was as a father to those 2 kids was part of the reason why he couldn't prune that little boy when he was a TVA agent. And the idea that B-15 didn't want to prune timelines because she was worried about all the lives, the billions of lives being lost, goes to like who she was as a nurse, you know, in her previous life, being a person who wants to save lives. So I think they give you like these little nuggets of who these characters were, and that kind of seeps into who they ultimately were in the TVA as well. And I don't know, I just think the way that was kind of constructed and kind of how that was kind of revealed was kind of beautiful to watch and to see. I don't know, that was just like something that I noticed that I liked.
You know, you bring those points up, I see what you're saying, and I would concede to that. Like, I think that is what the purpose is.
Yeah.
Maybe I just wasn't having a good enough time with it. You know, you talk about the episode starts and then it's just like a gunshot and we're racing through it. And because it's so singularly focused, you know, we got to do this thing. We have this one mission. There isn't really time to explore and meander the way that the first season did. And I actually think like the meandering in the first season allowed for so much discovery of the mythology and the weirdness of variants. And I miss like all the variant stuff and like the time slipping and the destructive force and the loom. Just I never engaged with it.
Okay, yeah, so we're gonna take a break and we're gonna kind of get a little bit deeper with that season finale, which I thoroughly enjoyed that season finale, so we'll talk a little bit about that. So stay right there. When we come back, we'll have more Loki spoiler discussion when we return. Stay right there.
Going to cheerleading camp next to the abandoned insane asylum, it's like throwing good blood away.
50% of Americans like watching blood get spilled in horror movies, but only 3% donated. Now that's scary.
Welcome back. We are going to continue our discussion of Loki Season 2 with spoilers, so you've been warned. So Brad, let's talk about that season finale, because I really responded to that season finale.
As did I.
And now, I'm not going to lie and tell you that I understood all of the science, all of the timey-wimey stuff.
What happens exactly?
Yeah, like the logistics of it, I'm not even going to sit here and say I understand.
He ends on the throne, right? And he creates Yggdrasil out of the many strands of the multiverse. He becomes the loom, basically, right? Is that what's going on?
It feels that way. But you know what? Outside of all of that, it's the emotional story that really worked for me when you see the sacrifice that Loki makes for his friends, because he has that moment that I talked about with Mobius, where he has to go back to his friends to find out, like, you know, what is it that I need to do? What's the choice that I have to make? So it's almost like he's trying to reaffirm or get confirmation. So when he goes to Mobius, you know, he's asking, like, how do you decide who lives or dies? When he goes to Sylvie, you know, they're having that philosophical conversation about predestiny and free will.
Yeah, and his total fear that Loki has of being alone, which he states at a certain point in the second season, like that's his greatest fear. And you know, the way that the sacrifice at the end of this movie makes his life a life of loneliness, you know, like that bittersweetness is enjoyable. Like I respond to that. And I love the image of him being the god of stories. You know, I think that's a great place to take Loki. And it's not really an end, right? It's a Marvel property, so we know we're going to return to Loki at some point, I imagine.
I would think so too.
Probably be a little while, but we will see him again, and we'll see how successful he is on that throne.
It's interesting because Loki, you know, we've talked about this before in our conversations, just talking about Marvel throughout the years, as far as like looking at the MCU and looking at character arcs. You know, you look at Tony's arc, you look at Steve's arc, Thor has a great arc, Spider-Man has a great arc within the MCU. Loki, Wanda Maximoff is another one who has a really profound arc. But Loki has 2 arcs, I would argue. You know, he has...
There's 2 Lokis.
There's 2 Lokis. And I think...
There's more than 2 Lokis, but there's only 2 Lokis for us that we love.
Yeah, but you have that arc that goes from, you know, Thor to Thor Ragnarok and Infinity War, and then you have this one. And I think both of them are really profound for the character, especially when you start from the first Thor movie to where he ends up. I think it's beautiful in the way that
I think Tom Hiddleston's maybe in the most attractive character, like his performance is the most attractive performance in the MCU. Like there's something about his storyline and the way that they took him from Thor to Avengers to this point.
Yeah.
It's been a wild ride. And like I've loved it almost all the way through. Like I said, season 2 lost me a little bit in the middle there.
Yeah.
I love the finale and how we also go back to the finale of the first season with He Who Remains. And when he comes back and we see that, you know, he has a fail-safe plan. The thing that he said at the end of Loki season 1 really wasn't ultimately his end goal. And so now we get to challenge that He Who Remains once more. And Loki gets to, you know, actually do some damage towards that character who thinks that he knows everything because he's lived everything.
Yeah, but he doesn't.
Unless he does. Unless he does.
But that's also an interesting point to talk about as well, because there's a point where they're at the Citadel, I think is what it's called, and then he looks, Loki sees an equation on a board in the back, and I guess that's an equation that He Who Remains has kind of figured out. But looking at that, I guess Loki now understands what he needs to do to maybe do something that He Who Remains hasn't really thought of. But then again, we don't know. Has he thought of this?
Yeah, what's interesting about the way Loki season 2 ends is this could be the wrap on the He Who Remains and the Kang storyline if they wanted it to be.
If they wanted to
right?
be,
you know, right now on the slate, we still have Avengers Kang Dynasty and Avengers Secret Wars coming.
Yeah.
Maybe that changes, maybe that doesn't. It's a lot. There's a lot of time between now and then. But if they wanted to, this could be a pretty definitive end to the Kang tale.
Okay.
Or it could be, you know, a misdirection, a false start, a false end.
Yeah. Maybe this is a fail-safe in some way. but no, I thoroughly just enjoyed this season. I know we differ on that, but I mean, I think ultimately
I ended up enjoying the season.
Yeah.
And because I know where the second season ends, I am curious to revisit the second season to see if that middle section I'll find more compelling than I did while I was watching it.
What's your overall rating for this season?
So I'm going to be a little bit of a Grinch, Bryan. I for me, it didn't ultimately please. I didn't find it pleaderable. I got to go B-.
Oh man, that hurts me, man. That hurts me, man. But I get it. I understand. I understand with your points that you brought up. Again, for me, I think this is the best that Marvel has done on TV. Since
You're crazy.
I mean,
since what?
On TV, on Disney Plus.
Really?
Yeah.
No way.
I think
She-Hulk, WandaVision, Loki season 1, all better than this.
Well, I'm looking at Loki season 1 and 2. I'm putting that together.
Nope.
But
totally different filmmakers involved. Okay. Totally different plot.
Even if I separate it, I'm still going season 2. So it's a B+ for me. So those are our thoughts on Loki. Me and Brad will continue to debate this, so no worries. So let's review what we have talked about this week. So NYAD, we both give that a B+. The Sylvester Stallone documentary Sly, we both give that a B+. And we split on Loki Season 2. Brad gives that a B-. I give that a B+. So thank you for joining us on this latest episode of the B&B Movie Reviews. Come be a part of the conversation. If you have questions, suggestions, feel free to email us at bnbmoviereviews@gmail.com. And with that, we will see you at the movies.